Hey everyone, happy Monday. This is our first Wellbeing Weekly of November. It is November 1st. And this uh, episode of Wellbeing Weekly is going to be about why we must learn to process our emotions for relief and freedom. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because, so here's the backstory. So last Friday, I was talking to my boss and another coworker about the situation in the world. And I'm not even going to repeat specifically what it was because I don't want to trigger anybody else unknowingly if this is a trigger for you. But there's a lot of things going on in the world right now, and some of them are looming around this theme of control and taking away our freedoms. And so I had a very strong opinion about something that was going on specifically in my arena, my industry. And it did not sit well with me, to put it lightly. And so I noticed that as we were talking more about this topic, I was getting more and more angry. And I started to feel like I was beginning to have a moment. And I felt like I needed to just vent and get things off my chest because there were things that I was starting to really think about. And as I was thinking about them, I was noticing that I was feeling increasingly powerless. And if there's one thing about me that I cannot stand, it's feeling like I am not in control of my life and I do not have my own personal power. I can't stand feeling despair. I can't stand feeling like a victim. I just can't stand it. It's just not in my DNA. I used to feel that way many years ago, and that was something that I didn't know how to really work through. And so I was stuck in this place for a really long time. But once I learned about personal freedom and personal empowerment, that changed my whole world. And so on Friday, when I found myself going back into that place, it made me, instead of getting depressed about it, it made me want to lash out and fight. And so I actually just went straight into anger. And so I want to come here today to tell you all, first of all, yes, I am human. Yes, I love to empower people. I love to be uplifting. I love to be in joy. I love to inspire and encourage. But I do have my moments. I certainly do. And if you know me, one of the things I teach my clients is the emotional scale. So we have a very wide range as humans of emotions. And so sometimes people might think that what I'm trying to say is be happy and positive all the time. And that cannot be further from the truth. Yes, being happy is great, but sometimes we're just not happy, and that's okay. So the thing is, what I had to realize is, even though I might teach this stuff for a living, like I do this. This is me teaching about emotions. But in that moment on Friday, I had to acknowledge that I was still going through it, just like everybody else. We're going through some really interesting times right now. And I say the word interesting because I've had times where I've thought, oh wow, this is actually really fun and really, really cool, because imagine what the future can be. Like, we're shaking things up and we're coming to we're getting new ideas, and that's really cool. There's some freedom in finding new options and new opportunities that weren't there before. But we have to also acknowledge that we're also in the messy middle. And sometimes when we're in the chaos and in the crazy, it's really hard to see the forest through the trees at times. And that's what happened to me on Friday. I was getting so caught up in the tree that I couldn't even think about the forest. And so I had to take pretty much the whole weekend to get my mind right. And so, Saturday I was having a really rough time still, but it was starting to get better around Sunday. And then, I work with kids at my church, and I just love kids. They're so fun. And I noticed that the kids, they're so easy when it comes to these heavy things because they don't even think about it. And so I had to realize, like, okay, it's time to take a step back. So I was feeling disempowered. I was feeling like a victim, but I had to get back to the basics. So what I wanted to talk about today was getting back to the basics and what can we do when we feel like we're losing control and we're slipping into despair, feeling disempowered, discouraged, or even feeling like we just want to give up. So I wrote down some tips here. I have 5 different things that we can do to shift ourselves from disempowered to empowered. So the first thing and you all know I'm a huge fan of self-awareness. So the very first thing I want you all to do is what I had to stop and do is I asked myself 2 very important questions. Number 1, who do I have control over? And so I had to acknowledge I do not have control over the media. I don't have control over what they choose to publish. I don't have control over anyone in politics. There's nothing I can do right now. I can write a strong word letter to my senators and my congressmen, but I can't specifically go into their office and tell them how to do their jobs. That's not my place, and that's not I don't have that kind of power or authority. And the second thing I had to ask myself is, what do I have control over? So I cannot change the circumstances in this world. I cannot end poverty. I cannot end homelessness or child neglect or child abuse. There's a lot of things that I want to do, and I have very grand visions for society and what I think it can be. And I'm not going to let go of those ideals and visions. But what I had to stop and do is take a step back and say, okay, I do not have control over people. I do not have control over specific circumstances and things right now. But even though there's so much that I can't do, I had to acknowledge that, which is the third question. What is it that I can do right now in this moment? So the first thing I had to do was just breathe. I had to just take a few deep breaths and then actually just I didn't have a chance to take a nap in that moment, but later on when I went home, I just tried to get some rest, and I did take a nap. I think maybe like 10 or 15 minutes, and that was all I had, but that was enough to just distract myself from going down the spiral of destruction that I was continuing to go down as the day went on. So basically the point here is, when you stop and ask yourself, what can I do right now? You're stopping the spiral of destruction, and you're just basically like putting a fork in that road and saying, okay, now that I've been walking down this road, I know I don't like it. I don't like where it's leading. And so I'm going to just make a decision. And I know I can't fix this whole problem in this moment, but in this moment, I can actually just take a nap, or I can take my attention off of this topic altogether. And so that's what I did. And thankfully, the other thing that happened this weekend was my boyfriend brought over his PlayStation, and we played Grand Theft Auto 5. And it has been years since I played that game. And I don't know if you've all had a chance to play it, but it is so fun when it comes to relieving stress. And so it's interesting what happened with me, because I've been in, my heart space and wanting to just love the world for such a long time, that when I first started playing the game, I was hesitant to even do anything that's kind of like the point of the game, right? So the point of the game is just like to go ham and mass carnage and everything. Not that the whole point is to kill people, but you have the opportunity to do things that you wouldn't do in like your real reality of life. So at first when I started playing, I was like hesitant to, get crazy, and I was driving very slow, and I wanted to avoid the people. And then after a second, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to run over somebody. And I did it, and it wasn't a video game. And then I realized, you know what? I'm just going to go ham. And that's exactly what I did. I went ham in the video game. And I tell you what, I enjoyed it. Yes, I'm going to be honest. It was completely satisfying to run over people, to shoot at police cars. And this is a terrible message, but what I'm saying is this: the ability to let off some of that anger in a non-destructive way in reality, I think that's actually really helpful. And so I'm not saying get, Grand Theft Auto. This is not a plug. They're not sponsoring me for this video, but I'm just saying that, sometimes we have to acknowledge that we are going through some serious emotions right now. And sometimes getting them out is the best thing we can do for ourselves. And one of my friends told me about this room that's somewhere in the Miami area. And it's literally a room where you can just get a baseball bat, a sledgehammer, and just go ham on some glass bottles. And, there's some punching bags in there. And this is something that I think is actually really brilliant, because when we need to, get out these emotions, it's a tough thing to manage when you're trying to force yourself to be kind and be loving. That's great to be loving, but what I do not want anyone to think that I'm saying is that you have to be fake, because that's the worst thing you can do. Like, always honor yourself and your emotions and where you are. And if you're not in your heart space, if you're feeling rageful, then give yourself an appropriate outlet to express that. So the good thing about this is that you're realizing like, okay, I'm getting this out. I'm giving myself the opportunity to acknowledge where I am. I'm not judging myself in a negative way. But then after you get that out, those emotions, what I want you to do is just start to take your focus off of the problem and begin to shift the momentum by asking yourself the fifth question here, which is, what do I now want? So what I want you to do is start to get really good at becoming a visioneer and start to really think about, okay, given the situation that we're in right now, what would I like to create? What would I like to see more of? What do I want most out of all the things? If I had a choice, what would I want most out of this life? So for me, what I had to start to really think about was I want a world that's more peaceful. But since I know that I can't control other people, what options do I have? And so the option that I came to was that I will find a way to create more peace within myself. Because even though I can't change the news, even though I can't change the people down the street or the politicians, I can always change myself. And the other thing is I want a happier world. But even though I know I can't control other people's circumstances and make them be happy, what I can do is find ways to create my own happiness. And so distracting myself, playing video games, going for a walk in nature, going for a swim. And even yesterday, I went for a jog at like 6:30 at night. So just whatever you can do that's first of all healthy, and it's also not harmful to yourself or others, whatever you can do that fits within those two parameters to make yourself feel better, I encourage you to go full force with those things. So just a quick recap of the 5 different tips. Number 1 is you want to ask yourself, who do you have control over? And really think about this. Like you might say, oh, I can control my children, I can control my husband. And maybe that's true to an extent, excuse me. But what I really want you to think about is that you ultimately only have control over yourself. Second question you want to ask yourself is, what do I have control over? So if you can't control any external circumstances beyond your circle of influence, then what in your own individual world and your own reality can you begin to change and focus on? The number 3 question you want to ask yourself is, what can I do right now in this present moment? So even if that means changing the subject completely, if that means watching a TV show, if that means turning on your favorite music, if that means going ham on in game Grand Theft Auto 5, whatever it is that you can do to distract yourself or even release some of that anger or that tension or even that sadness, if you need to just cry, honor your feelings, honor yourself, acknowledge where you are, let off some of that steam. And then number 4 is shifting the momentum, which is basically taking your attention off the problem and try to shift it more towards what you prefer and look at things through a fresh pair of eyes, which is going to help you become more solution oriented. And then the final thing is ask yourself, what do I now want? What do I now want to create given the circumstance and given the people that I'm surrounded by and given the media? What is it that I now want? Because you always have control over your own vision and you have control over how you focus on things and your own happiness and your own peace. And so these are just some quick tips I wanted to drop your way for this week. And, these are, like I said, these are really hard times. Obviously, I don't have to keep telling you guys that, but these are things that have really worked for me. And like I said, a couple of days, over the weekend, I had my moment. But I know that for some people, this might be a really, really hard challenge. And so if that's you, then I encourage you just to reach out and realize, first of all, you're not alone. Second of all, you don't need to judge yourself for however you might be feeling. If you're feeling suicidal, if you're feeling homicidal, if you're feeling despair, so many different emotions can be going through your body right now. And if you don't know how to process that, then I would love to be a support for you. I would love to hold space, teach you some techniques and some strategies that have worked for me and some of my clients. And otherwise, feel free to just reach out to me or, comment on the video, send me a DM. I would love to support you in any way possible. And if something, you want to go deeper into your self-development journey, I would love to support you in my container with my coaching program. So please reach out if you have any questions, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.